I'm sure by now that most people have heard of the Freedom Convoy, a group estimated to be less than 15,000 in numbers, with a small number of truckers who oppose vaccine mandates in Canada. They chose to protest by Parliament Hill, as well as other areas throughout Canada, and then blockading certain border crossings, impeding business and travel. They were also very loud, constantly honking the horns of their vehicles and generally disturbing the peace. Several communities filed lawsuits against them and got court orders to have them stop honking. This protest had significant ties to the far right, with many hateful symbols and flags being seen among the protesters, which is why many people chose to publicly distance themselves from its supporters. Teamsters Canada, representing more than 55,000 professional drivers, including approximately 15,000 long haul truck drivers, of whom 90% are vaccinated, said that the protest serves to delegitimize the real concerns of most truck drivers today. The Canadian Trucking Alliance issued a statement which cautioned the public that a great number of protesters have no connection to the trucking industry and have a separate agenda beyond a disagreement over cross-border vaccine requirements. The convoy started several crowdfunding campaigns to help support the movement. About 10 million was raised on GoFundMe and about 8 million was raised on GiveSendGo. On February 14th, Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, invoked the Emergencies Act to end border blockades and the occupation of downtown Ottawa. This was the first time the act had been invoked since its 1988 inception. Both of the crowdfunding campaigns had funds frozen and then eventually reimbursed to donors. The donor list for the second crowdfunding campaign, GiveSendGo, was conveniently hacked and leaked to the public. By February 19th, at least 76 bank accounts linked to the protests were frozen under the Emergencies Act. Most accounts had been unfrozen by February 23rd. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association criticized the invocation of the act in a press release, saying the federal government has not met the threshold necessary to invoke the Emergencies Act. This law creates a high and clear standard for good reason. The act allows government to bypass ordinary democratic processes. This standard has not been met. In the same press release, the CCLA stated that the normalization of emergency legislation threatens our democracy and our civil liberties. On February 17th, the CCLA announced it was suing the federal government over the act's invocation, stating that the Emergency Act must be reserved for national emergencies, which they argued was a legal standard that had not been met. I was going to say that I hope Canada's form of checks and balances allows for some power to challenge Trudeau's use of the Emergency Act. However, on February 21st, the House of Commons voted to confirm the Emergencies Act with 185 for and 151 opposing the motion. I ideologically disagree with the protests. I support vaccine mandates that allow for people to either be vaccinated or have to take a COVID-19 test to keep the public safe. The targeting of crowdfunding and the use of the Emergency Act to freeze bank accounts does not directly address the problem of the blockade of travel and commerce. If they want them to physically be moved out the way, then they should quell the protests by arresting people and towing trucks, which they eventually did. I would support calling in the military or the National Guard to end the protests, something that Trudeau was against. Freezing bank accounts was an overreach of power, and that action alone would not solve the problem. Usually, an egregious overstep of power by the government happens with an excuse that is used to justify it. I want to use the Patriot Act as an example to illustrate a point of a time we gave away our rights and it backfired. After the September 11th attacks on the World Trade Center, the Bush administration signed into law the Providing Appropriate Tools Required to Intercept and Obstruct Terrorism, which is the Patriot Act, which allowed for expanded surveillance abilities of law enforcement, including by tapping domestic and international phones and authorization of indefinite detention without trial of non-citizens who were suspected of terrorism. In short, the act ramped up government surveillance while using the excuse of terrorism and national security concerns. The American people went along with it because the fear of Islamic terrorism was so great that we thought extreme surveillance was justified. That power to surveil was then used against the American people to gain access to private and personal information, which had nothing to do with criminal activity or terrorism. In this case, the powers given to the Canadian government using the excuse of the Emergency Act is a horrible precedent to set, because any time in the future when a protest or movement disagrees with the state, they can and will be financially doxxed and ruined. That is why it is important to advocate for everyone's fundamental rights, even folks you ideologically disagree with, so that when it's time for someone you agree with comes under fire, they still have rights that haven't been eroded away. I was discussing this issue with a friend, and they said that because the Freedom Convoy is breaking the law, they think it's justified for the government to take the money of criminals. And they cited how asset forfeiture happens if someone is profiting from committing crime. This is a valid point and has gotten me to see the other side. I think stopping the crowdfunding is maybe justified, but freezing personal bank accounts is a bit much. The only problem is I want for people who participated in the protest to still be able to buy groceries, which from February 19th to the 23rd, when the bank accounts were frozen, some people theoretically could have been stopped from doing that. I also have a problem with major publications trying to dox small dollar donors. Journalists from the Washington Post and Reuters were both caught publicizing the names of small donors to the Freedom Convoy. This gives the appearance of a concerted effort to blacklist people who you disagree with from all of society. After doing a little digging, I found this white hat hacker, Aubrey Cottle, also known as Cortana, who took credit for the Give, Send, Go hack.
Nothing scares me. Nothing. Yes, I doxed the truckers. I did it. It was me. I hacked Give, Send, Go, baby. And I'd do it again. I'd do it 100 times. I did it. I did it. Come at me. What are you going to do? What are you going to do to me, huh? Give, Send, Go. I don't care. You can literally put my name into the news tab on Google, and you can find everything I've done. I am literally in every mainstream media publication for the things that I do. I'm not an unknown actor. I'm literally a famous fucking cyber terrorist. And you think that you can scare me?
A white hat hacker is someone who uses their talents for good or to aid law enforcement or the state. Kurtaner has claimed that he has worked with various government agencies in the past. It seems that the Canadian government hired him to do the hack with the intent of doxing donors to the movement from the very start. They're the ones with the greatest motive, which makes all of this even more worrying, as Canada is willing to use any means necessary and is becoming more and more authoritarian. But that's all I have to say. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please consider subscribing here on YouTube or becoming a member of my Patreon. Thanks for watching.